Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are. And welcome to our new webinar in our series on the Taijiman case, another important webinar. We will be featuring important speakers and these testimonials on this case. Today's webinar title is Taijiman Women Fighting for Justice and Conscience, and is brought to you thanks to CESNUR, Center for Studies on New Religions and Human Rights Without Frontier, which we all, of course, thank. Today, in fact, is a very special day. It's a day of observance of the UN, the United Nations, and it's the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. The United Nations celebrates this International Day since 1999. It should worry everybody, I think, that in the year 2024, it is still needed to observe such a day. It means that humankind has still not learned from its mistakes. Gender-based harassment and violence are still daily plagues in too many places of the world. Much still needs to be accomplished before presenting ourselves as a truly civilized people. It is then proper today to underline the great role played by women in the said Taijiman case as well. A peaceful, law-abiding, patriotic group of citizens of the Republic of China in Taiwan has been and is persecuted by the state on a fabricated accusation of tax evasion. The harassment has lasted for more than a quarter of a century, with the result that fundamental rights such as religious liberty have been curtailed. Women suffered and suffer the most for upholding the right of the Taijiman community in front of blatant injustice, defending the irreducible prerogatives of every human being's conscience. To illustrate this briefly, I would like to use the example of an extraordinary American woman who lived in the late 19th century. She, of course, had nothing to do with Taijiman, but meditating on her life and deeds may serve our purpose. Susan B. Anthony was born in Adams, Massachusetts in 1820. She championed the abolition of slavery and was an ardent feminist. He took part in the famous meeting that another great woman and feminist, Lucretia Coffin Mott, organized in Seneca Falls, New York State on July 1920, 1848. It was an historic event that started a whole movement directed to fight against inequalities. It centered on women's rights and culminated in the Declaration of Rights and Sentiments. The text was crafted by a third famous feminist, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and strongly supported by the iconic male black abolitionist Frederick Douglass. It is noteworthy that the Declaration of Rights and Sentiments was based on the 1776 US Declaration of Independence, as if the famous sentence contained in its preamble, "all men are created equal," was yet to be recognized and implemented in its full meaning. Of course, at that time, it was clear to all that the word man meant human beings and included both biological men and biological women. Feminists like Anthony and Mott clearly intended that all men are created equal meant all human beings are created equal. They objected not to the use of the word man in the Declaration of Independence, but to the discrimination of women within the totality of men, i.e., the humankind. Anthony signed the Declaration of Rights and Sentiments 2 weeks later, that famous historic meeting during a second meeting in Rochester, New York State. In the following decades, Anthony, Mott, and Stanton, the three ardent feminists, get to know each other better, giving birth to the American Equal Rights Association in 1866. Later, in May 1869, Anthony and Stanton founded the Nation Women's Suffrage Association, advocating for women's right to vote. In November of that same year, a rival organization was created, the American Women's Suffrage Association, when a portion of the equal rights movement, taking up the 14th Amendment to the US Constitution, passed in 1868, was satisfied with granting voting rights to African American males and forgetting women of all colors. Feeling betrayed, Anthony and Stanton refused to acknowledge the 14th Amendment if that didn't include also women. At the end of the day, they separated from fellow abolitionist Douglas and continued alone their fight for women. Soon, while Stanton never forgot that split Anthony, always believing that unity was strength, put herself into hard work to reunite the movement. She succeeded in 1890 when the two previous inimical groups were molded into a new third one, the National American Woman Suffrage Association. Anthony was totally right. After 20 years, women in America obtained the right to vote through the 19th Amendment to the Constitution in 1910. Yet, none of those great women lived enough to see that day. Anthony, who died in Rochester in 1906, fought her whole life to build a better future for those to come without enjoying that radiant victory. She was only able in her lifetime to obtain that women could enroll at the University of Rochester in 1900s. Quite an achievement anyway for those times. Now, Anthony came from a Quaker family. Her relatives took the more leftist side when Quakers split into a liberal and conservative faction in 1826. In years, he became quite hostile to every form of organized religion and was regarded as an icon of liberalism. Nonetheless, Anthony toured the world for 45 years, giving 75 to 100 public speeches per year, always strongly defending the rights of women also to be wives and mothers. Anthony and her friend Stanton, who held quite liberal views on marriage, were staunchly opposed to abortion. They equaled that to slavery, and defending human life since the beginning was part of their abolitionist effort. They gave birth to a pro-life feminist movement that in the US exists to this day. It propagated the idea that, this is important, men cannot impose anything on women, including the life or death of the creatures the women, and only women, can welcome and nurture in their womb. Anthony and her friends and colleagues were indeed quite radical. They were radical in defending the rights of women, accepting no excuse. They were radical in their fight against female oppression from men, society, and the state. They were radical in defending justice, peace, equality, and life, all the ingredients for a decent world. They are today true symbols of feminism, and I think that their example may serve as a fitting case for the women of Tajuman who fight the same good fight for justice, peace, equality, and life. It is now my pleasure and honor to launch our as a final introduction, our first video for today. It's a message by the UN Secretary General, and soon after we will start our webinar with the first session. Now the video.
Violence against women and girls continues to be the most pervasive and pressing human rights issue in the world today. It is both an abhorrent crime and a public health emergency with far-reaching consequences for millions of women and girls in every corner of the globe. The latest figures from UN Women confirm that during the COVID-19 pandemic, levels of violence against women and girls have increased. Across 13 countries, almost half of all women reported that they or a woman they know began to experience gender-based violence during the pandemic. Almost a quarter of women reported that household conflicts had become more frequent. A similar proportion said they felt less safe at home. Violence in any part of society affects us all, from the scars on the next generation to the weakening of the social fabric. We can draw a straight line between violence against women, civil oppression, and violent conflict. From rape and sexual slavery used as tools of war to the thread of misogyny that runs through violent extremism. But violence against women is not inevitable. The right policies and programs bring results. That means comprehensive, long-term strategies that tackle the root causes of violence, protect the rights of women and girls, and promote strong and autonomous women's rights movements. This is the model that the United Nations has built through its partnership with the European Union, the Spotlight Initiative. Last year, in partner countries, we saw a 22% increase in prosecution of perpetrators. 84 laws and policies were passed or strengthened, and more than 650,000 women and girls were able to access gender-based violence services despite restrictions related to the pandemic. Change is possible. Now is the time to redouble our efforts so that together we can eliminate violence against women and girls by 2030.
Very aptly, our two main panelists for the next session, the first session of our webinar today, are women, in a very special day for women as today. The first of our panelists is Dr. Carolina Maria Kowska. I hope my Polish is good enough to pronounce her name. She's a researcher in esotericism and new religious movement at the Center for Comparative Studies and Civilization at the Jagiellonian University in Poland. Dr. Kotkowska, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Marco, for the introduction. Welcome, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. November 25th is the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women since 1981. This day encourages reflection on the fact that in the 21st century, not only we still have problems with human rights violations in general, but we are facing a situation when one half of humanity is statistically affected by violence more often than the other half because of gender inequality. The situation also still has institutional reinforcement. 1/3 of the countries in the world have not outlawed domestic violence. This issue has been addressed many times by the United Nations, starting in 1979, when the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women was adopted. Later, in 1993, the General Assembly issued the Declaration on the Elimination of Violence Against Women, and in 2008 there was a campaign called the Unite to End Violence Against Women. The entanglement of the problem of inequality and women's rights and religions has two different sides. Some religious views are part of the problem. On the other hand, the move toward changes was also related to religious views. Those focus on the practical dimensions of equality of all humanity despite outside differences. The period of so-called occult revival in Europe and the United States in the 19th century coincided with numerous social and cultural changes and was undoubtedly itself a consequence of many of them. The historical and ideological connections of the fight for equal rights for women with spiritualism and later modern theosophy cannot be ignored. Famous suffragettes were also recruited among esotericists and vice versa. The interest in non-orthodox spirituality often went hand in hand with the fight for the equality and had ideological foundations. In the perspective of the supremacy of the spirit over the corporeal shell, as well as reincarnation, in which the wandering divine element traveled dressing in bodies of different sexes, the idea of superiority of one of them had to be undermined. Dominant, authoritarian male roles in the family and the church ceased to satisfy women, who were also treated in a worse way from a civic perspective. Political rights, after all, are one of the most important aspects of subjective autonomy. The prophets of the monotheistic religions were increasingly being displaced by prophetesses of the New Age of Spirit, and the mutual entanglement of spiritualism and the American suffrage movement is one of the most interesting episodes of the 19th century occultism. The story of the Fox sisters, who supposedly contacted spirits in a house in Hydesville, New York, spread all over the world. Interest in possible contact with the spiritual world reached a much wider and fertile religious and ideological ground in New York State, where one of so-called Great Awakenings took place. It was not unusual for the Foxes to be friends with a group of Quakers, a domination popular in the area, and one of the families living nearby, a radical follower of this denomination, played a very important role in popularizing the new method of contact with the world. Isaac Post and his second wife Amy, who rented a house in Rochester to the Fox family before they moved to Hydesville, were famous abolitionists and promoters of equal rights for women, and ran one of the most active stations of the Underground Railroad, EA, an organization helping slaves. The equality of all people and a deep conviction of an unbroken chain of communication between creator and creation were closely connected with the Quaker denomination. It should be emphasized that spiritualism was not, of course, a separate religion, but it was closely connected with religion and remained so, even apart from its American beginnings, although it later combined with various worldviews. Many Quakers became spiritualists, and the idea spread very quickly, first within New York State, later to other areas. Quakers were advocates for equal rights for all people. The fight for women's suffrage began in the United States in the 1840s, emerging for a broader movement for women's rights. The first convention on these issues took place in New York State, the Seneca Falls, in 1848. What is not mentioned in most textbooks is that a large number of participants in these conventions were spiritualists. However, what did members of radical religious groups and spiritualists have in common apart from their beliefs? The ability and willingness to speak out. Although it may be far from obvious today, in the mid-19th century, the average woman was very far from civic activities. Therefore, membership in religious groups where it was normal for a woman to lead a meeting, providing practice in speaking, which was so important for early suffragettes. Of course, spiritualists also supported the fight for equality, and since they were the few women who were listening in public, during seances and outside of them, they began to talk about things that many did not want to hear before, that women were often slaves in the marriages, that violence occurred in marriages, that rape in marriage was still rape. One of the spiritualists was the first female candidate for the office of President of the United States in history, Victoria Woodhull. As we can see, not only the historical context, the connection, to some extent accidental, of spiritualism with some religious movements, but also ideological, the fight for equality, and cultural, related to the fact that women were beginning to be listened to in public places, meant that the links between spiritualism and the suffrage movement were really strong. Unfortunately, it was omitted in the first study of the movement for women's equality from 1881. It disappeared from academic writings for over 100 years, only to be rediscovered in its entirety by Anne Broad in 1899 in her book Radical Spirits, Spiritualism and Women's Rights in 19th Century America. The book had an updated second edition in 2020. Spiritualism was undoubtedly the first and most important phenomenon associated with esotericism, and at the same time with the women's rights movement on such scale in 19th century, but by no means the only one, although it was often a source for the other concepts. The initiatory organization which carried on its banners universal brotherhood, regardless of gender, creed, race, etc., and whose de facto leader was a woman, Helena Blavatsky, was the Theosophical Society. Not only was it founded in New York, but Blavatsky wrote her first major work, Isis Unveiled, in the very part of the state where their spiritualism flourished, in the town of Ithaca. Her stay there not only prompts her to organize her own beliefs about the trend, but also to engage in activities for equality. Recognition of the necessity of striving for universal brotherhood was the only ideological requirement for accepting a candidate into the structures of the Theosophical Society. Today, after over a century and a half, some issues are still not resolved, yet the entanglement of spirituality and the fight for women's rights and against violence targeting women is still visible. In the case of Taiwanese spiritual group Taiji Men, both sides of these issues are there: peaceful fight for equality within the movement and violence against its disciples. The Taiji Men Qigong Academy seeks to preserve the traditional essence of Chinese culture while enhancing the physical, mental, and spiritual well-being of people worldwide. While Taiji Men's core principle is to cultivate positive energy from the universe and draw inspiration from virtuous teachings of sages throughout history, the organization suffers from illegally imposed taxes, human rights violation, and various kinds of violence. In Taiji Men philosophy, human rights are considered innate, laws are viewed as equally applicable to all, and men and women are seen as inherently collaborative. This reflects the concept of Taiji, where yin and yang harmonize and support one another. In his lecture for the International Day of Peace in 2021, Dr. Hong Tao-Tzi, Taiji Men's Shifu, Grandmaster, underlined that the essence of a culture of conscience lies in preventing war, resolving conflicts, and through non-violent methods, and actively fostering peace. He wrote, "Throughout the history of peacemaking, women have played a vital and increasingly influential role in promoting social and global dialogue, multilateral cooperation, and the well-being of the world's citizens. They are peacemakers and leaders, like the Mother Earth who embraces and nurtures all things." He also referred to three laureates of the 2011 Nobel Peace Prize, when three women, two Liberians and one Yemeni, were awarded the distinction for their work campaigning for women's rights. As Dr. Hong wrote, they have made significant contributions to human rights, democracy, and peace through their non-violent struggle for women's security and the right to participate fully in the peace-building efforts. The key to peace lies in promoting the purest form of human love and practicing it with perseverance. Actions based on love and conscience will be the strongest force for peaceful reform and the best way to maintain long-term peace in the world. Taiji Mendizi, disciples, implement this philosophy of equality in practical aspects of everyday life, both in small and in the most important matters. Unfortunately, the problems of violence against women do not bypass them either. This applies to the problems of the entire group, such as unfair taxes, nationalization of sacred land, media slander, but also to recent events such as restriction on freedom of speech. A particularly striking case is of that Mrs. Huang, a volunteer from the Legal and Tax Reform League, who in 2020 was detained and interrogated for hours because she was holding a poster while peacefully protesting. On the occasion of the International Day of the Elimination of Violence Against Women, it is crucial to underline that in the democratic country, law enforcement and the judicial system should never be used as tools of political control or a means of inflicting violence on women who are innocent of any wrongdoing, and there should be no excuse from that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kowska, for your very engaging paper, very interesting. I really appreciate it. And at some extent, it intertwined with my introduction. It was very interesting for me. I added many interesting, notions about that, and I really appreciate it when you say that religion is when it comes to women's rights and persecution and sufferance, it's a double-edged sword, so to speak. I mean, it can be a solution or part of the solution, but it can be a problem, and we see this quite every day all over the world in different situations. But we see it happening, and you then tied all that into the Cashman case very aptly, and I do thank you for this. You added a very valuable contribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We now move on to our second panelist for this first session today. As I announced, another woman on purpose, and it's very important, very interesting. We will hear soon from Ms. Christine Mir. She's Deputy Director de Coordination des Associations et des Particuliers pour la Liberté de Conscience. Ms. Mir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marco. Then good morning or good afternoon or good evening to everybody. Today, we commemorate the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. This day, observed annually on 25 November, is an important reminder of the ongoing fight to end violence and discrimination against women around the world. It is also an opportunity to pay tribute to the countless women who have courageously stood up against injustice, often at great personal risk, to demand truth, justice, and equality. The theme of today's webinar, Women Fighting for Justice and Conscience, resonates deeply with the struggles of women throughout history and around the world. Women have not only been victims of institutional violence, but have also been powerful agents of change, challenging oppressive systems and inspiring movements for justice. Today, I would like to highlight the stories of three extraordinary women, Rosa Parks, Miss Wang, and Madame Yume Young. Their lives and struggles exemplify the resilience and courage it takes to confront systemic injustice and fight for what is right. Let us begin with Rosa Parks, whose name is synonymous with the civil rights movement in the United States. On December 1, 1955, in Montgomery, Alabama, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a segregated bus to a white passenger. This simple yet profound act of defiance sparked a movement that would change the course of history. Rosa Parks was not just a woman tired after a long day of work. She was a seasoned activist, deeply committed to the fight for racial equality. But her courage was remarkable because she faced a double burden, being both Black and a woman in a deeply segregated and patriarchal society. To be a Black woman resisting injustice in the 50s was to confront not one, but two layers of systemic oppression. Her arrest led to the Montgomery bus boycott, a pivotal moment in the civil rights movement. It was a movement that required immense sacrifice, perseverance, and unity from the Black community. Rosa Parks' quiet courage became a rallying cry for justice, proving that one person's conscience could ignite a collective struggle for equality. Former President of the United States, Barack Obama, said in his tribute to Rosa Parks, I quote, "Rosa Parks tells us that there's always something we can do. She tells us that we all have responsibilities to ourselves and to each other. She reminds us that this is how change happens, not primarily through the exploits of the famous, but through the countless small acts of courage performed by ordinary people every day. End of quote. Rosa Parks' legacy reminds us that the struggle for justice is universal, transcending time and geography. Just like Rosa Parks stood up against institutional racism, Taiji Mendizi disciples have been fighting systemic injustice in Taiwan for decades. The Taiji Men's case is a glaring example of how governments can abuse their power to target individuals and groups. Since 1996, the Taiji Men have faced unjust tax demands and persecution from the Taiwanese tax authorities, despite numerous court rulings in their favor. This long-standing case have caused immense suffering to the Taiji Men community, both emotionally and financially. The women of Taiji Men have played a crucial role in this struggle for justice. Their stories reveal the human cost of institutional violence and the extraordinary resilience required to stand up against it. Let us look at two such women, Miss Wang and Madame Yume Young. Miss Wang's story is a poignant example of the psychological violence inflicted by systemic injustice. She was one of many Taiji Mendizi who protested relentless harassment from Taiwan's tax authorities. She was abused by the police just for protesting. The stress and pressure of being unfairly targeted took a severe toll on her health and well-being. Despite this, Miss Wang refused to give up. Her determination to fight for the truth and expose the injustice perpetrated by the government is a testament to her inner strength and resilience. Miss Wang's experience underscores the broader issue of how institutional violence disproportionately affects women. Women often bear the brunt of such injustice, not only as individuals, but also as caregivers and community leaders. Yet, like Rosa Parks, Miss Wang chose to resist rather than retreat, becoming a symbol of courage for others in the Taiji Men community. Another remarkable woman was Madame Yume Young, co-founder of the Taiji Men King Kong Academy with her husband, Dr. Hong Taote, the Chifu, Grandmaster of the movement. She was the beloved Shimu of Taiji Mendizi. Madame Yu was not only a devoted leader of Taiji Men, but also a source of inspiration and guidance for many. Her unwavering belief in the principle of truth and justice, even in the face of relentless persecution, left an indelible mark on the Taiji Men community. Madame Yu's leadership extends beyond the legal struggle. She embodied the value of love, compassion, and resilience, and encouraged others to remain steadfast in their pursuit of justice. Her passing was a profound loss, but her legacy continues to inspire the Taiji Men sisters and their ongoing fight against injustice. The struggles of Rosa Parks, Miss Wang, and Madame Yume Young may differ in context, but they share a common thread: the fight against systemic injustice fueled by courage, conscience, and an unyielding commitment to truth. Rosa Parks' defiance of segregation offers Taiji Men sisters a powerful message of hope and perseverance. Her story reminds us that even in the face of overwhelming odds, change is possible when individuals refuse to accept injustice. Miss Wang and Madame Yume Young, like Rosa Parks, have shown extraordinary resilience in their fight against institutional violence. Their stories are a testament to the power of conscience and the importance of standing up for what is right, no matter how long the struggle may take. As we reflect on the theme of today's webinar, Women Fighting for Justice and Conscience, Let us honor the courage of women like Rosa Parks, Miss Wang, and Madame Yume Young, and all the Taijimen sisters. Their stories remind us that the fight for justice is not just a legal or political battle. It is a moral imperative that requires perseverance, resilience, and faith in the power of truth. The example of Rosa Parks is a beacon of hope. Her legacy teaches us that progress is made through countless acts of courage, large or small. To the Taijimen sisters, your fight for justice and conscience is not in vain. Your resilience inspires others around the world to stand up against injustice and to believe that truth and justice will one day prevail. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine, for giving us yet more examples of courageous and heroic women who fight for justice, peace, and truth. And for, again, in a different way as compared to what we did before, but in a very important, another important way, you tied that directly to the Daijiman case. So things are not just opposed in a superficial way, but they intermingle very deeply. So to some extent, the Taijiman women are carry on a long tradition of women standing for truth, peace, and justice. And this is very important. We're just adding examples and adding testimonials to this long fight in history, which unfortunately, as we underlined many times today, it is not yet over. And this is, again, very sad. So as to the Taijiman, it's a double-folded sufferance. The Taijiman case as such, which is a blatant injustice, and it contains these sufferance specifically of women. This is very, very important, and your contribution is very, very much valuable, and I do thank you. And I'm now leaving the floor to Mr. Willy Fautré, Director and co-founder of Human Rights Without Frontiers, which is one of the two organizations who's sponsoring this series of webinar. He will be introducing, as our custom, the second session for today's webinar, where Dizzy or disciples of Taijimen will give their contribution. And with no further ado, I leave the virtual mic, to Willy Fautré. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Marco, for the introduction to the second session. I think I don't have any word to add to what you said before, except that we will start with a video entitled "The Healing Power of Repentance."
Conscience Story Series: The Healing Power of Repentance. In ancient China, according to legend, a young man from Yueshi tribe contracted leprosy. His body was covered with red spots, and the entire village avoided him for fear of infection. Only his elderly mother stayed by his side, tirelessly caring for him and trying every possible remedy to cure his illness, but none of them worked. Feeling sorry for his mother and thinking that he had become a burden to her, the young man decided to leave home in the middle of the night. At midnight, he arrived at a dilapidated temple, where he knelt down in sorrow and cried out, "Oh, Bodhisattva, I have always been filial to my mother and respectful to my elders. How did I contract such a disease? Can you tell me why?" Afterwards, he was exhausted and fell asleep. In his dream, he saw himself in a past life as a local official. He had once launched a harsh inquiry into a theft case that had gone unsolved for 10 days. Despite knowing that the delay was due to the constable's illness, he ordered the constable to be flogged with 40 lashes. Even if others pleaded for mercy, he remained unmoved. Shortly after, someone reported, "Sir, the constable has died." He was shocked and said, "How could it be possible?" His staff explained, "The constable was seriously ill a few days ago, but he's feeling a little bit better today. He came to report the case to you despite still being unwell." He blamed his staff for not telling him about it earlier. He ordered the constable's body to be sent home for burial and prepared compensation money. However, he learned that the constable's 3-year-old child had died of fright upon seeing his father's corpse, and the constable's wife had hanged herself. He felt extremely guilty and could not eat or sleep well every day. One night, the constable's ghost came to him. "You caused the death of my entire family. I will never forgive you. I will make your body rot, and you will die a miserable death." The young man woke up in fright and realized that it was a dream given to him by Bodhisattva to make him understand the law of cause and effect. He knelt and worshipped Bodhisattva, vowing to adopt a vegetarian diet and recite scriptures to help the constable's spirit find peace. He said, "I caused their death. I only wish for the constable to forgive me and to retain enlightenment." Sincerely repentant, he was eventually blessed by Bodhisattva, and the red spot on his body gradually disappeared. The Buddhist scripture says, if you want to know the causes from your past life, look at what you are experiencing in this life. If you want to know the effect in your next life, look at what you are doing in this life. This story serves as a reminder that officials should exercise their power cautiously to avoid harming others and themselves. It also reminds us of the power of repentance. As long as we sincerely repent, we have the chance to resolve the sins accumulated over many lifetimes.
Thank you so much for this video that is really very inspiring for anybody, whatever his or her philosophical or religious background. And before giving the floor to the Dizzy that I will introduce afterwards, I would like to share some thoughts with you on the topic of women who worldwide follow their conscience and practice their faith, whatever the injustice. Many anonymous women are courageous and dedicated defenders of religious freedom around the world. Whatever the risks, they practice their faith openly or discreetly because it is what their conscience dictates them to do. At the cost of their freedom and sometimes of their life, they follow their conscience, whatever the injustice they have to go through. In Iran, for example, hundreds of Baha'i women have been arrested and sentenced to heavy prison terms just for teaching in private the basic principles of their religion to the next generation of their community. In October of this year, Susan Eid Mohammadzadegan and Nusha Zabet, 2 Baha'i female citizens, were sentenced to a total of 10 years in prison, along with additional social restrictions. In the court's ruling, each was sentenced to 5 years in prison. But additionally, both women have been banned from all educational and training activities for 18 months. They were convicted of, and I quote, engaging in educational or promotional activities contrary to the sacred Sharia of Islam, unquote. Both were arrested in August of last year at Mohazadegan's residence in Babol by security forces who did not even present a judicial warrant. The head of the judiciary had previously justified the closure of 2 schools and 10 educational and sports centers by claiming these institutions were promoting the Baha'i faith. One of the 2 women, Nusha Zabet, 39 years old, who is a psychologist and translator living in Tehran, has faced previous arrests and judicial encounters due to her faith. In Russia, 8 female Jehovah's Witnesses have been put in prison for years for studying the Bible in private houses. 127 Jehovah's Witnesses are currently serving long prison terms in Russia, a number of them being women of all ages. A few days ago, mid-November of this year, a criminal case was initiated against Tamara Bratseva, who is 68 years old. She was accused of organizing activities of an extremist organization banned in 2017, the Peaceful Movement of Jehovah's Witnesses. According to the investigation, and I quote, from September 2021 to August 2024, she had been holding meetings via video conference, as we are doing now, where, with the participation of followers, she promoted the ideas of a religious organization and the study of extremist materials attracting new participants, unquote. In fact, she was just holding Bible studies online. And it's known that Jehovah's Witnesses are peaceful people who refuse to use weapons and follow their conscience when they accept to go to prison for refusing to carry out military service. In China, young women of the Church of Almighty God, Falun Gong, have been tortured, sometimes to death, because of sharing their faith. Since the Chinese Communist Party initiated a 3-year general battle in 2019, targeting the Church of Almighty God, its members have endured escalating persecution, marked by a substantial increase in arrests and convictions. Between the 1st and the 3rd of September 2022, Guangdong police carried out a coordinated operation arresting 233 of their members, 233 members of the Church of Almighty God. Over 2 years later, in 2023, 194 of the arrested members of the Church of Almighty God were still in detention, with at least 163 already sentenced. The heaviest sentence was 11 years in prison. 11 years in prison. Last month in October, a female Falun Gong practitioner of 56 years in Shanxi was jailed for the 3rd time because of her faith, which is banned in China. She was sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. And in Shandong province, Mrs. Gao Chuhua, 72 years old, was sentenced to 1.5 years in March of this year for practicing Falun Gong. All these women are just anonymous heroes, heroes who are ready to sacrifice their freedom, their physical integrity, and their life for their faith. Taiji Mendizi can be happy to live in a democratic country, to be allowed to have a religion, to practice it and to share it. This does not mean that Taiwan is a perfect democracy, as injustice has prevailed since Tai Jimen was wrongly and illegally accused of tax fraud. The Supreme Court finally declared Tai Jimen non-guilty, but the rule of law is not always equivalent to the rule of justice. The rule of law continues to be manipulated by the judiciary, and injustice persists in this case, their case. For decades, female Desi have been at the forefront of the battle for justice in their case in Taiwan, following their conscience, signing petitions, demonstrating publicly, traveling around the world to spread the message. Their fight is the good fight, and it must go on as a spiritual heritage. Thank you for your attention during this sharing of some thoughts on that very specific day dedicated to the protection of women's rights, and especially to their physical and psychological integrity. And we now have 5 Desi who are in line to take the floor. As it is a day specifically dedicated to women and girls, 4 of them will be. There will also be 3 students among them, and a teacher, and as well someone coming from the private sector. And we will now start with Dora Chen, a psychology student. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Dora, and I'm a college student. I'm very pleased to participate in this forum. As a psychology student, we often discuss in gender psychology classes how women are influenced by societal roles and orientation. These include traditional Chinese concepts such as men working outside and women staying home, the low status of women in marriage, and the traditional view that femininity and leadership cannot coexist. Such notion often limits women both in the family and workplace, potentially impacting their mental well-being. However, there is one woman who has overturned these societal frameworks and become a paradigm of female strength stepping into the world, my Shimu. From a young age, I followed my parents in practicing Qigong at Taijimen. Taijimen is not just a place for cultivating oneself, it is also my home. My Shifu and Shimu are the leaders of this big family. In my impression, my Shimu is a very gentle person who always reminds the Dizi to take good care of themselves. Some may think that gentleness, strength, and leadership cannot coexist, but my Shimu perfectly demonstrated this advantage in her dealing with others. In 1996, when the Taijimen case occurred, my Shimu actively cooperated with the prosecutor's investigation to clarify the situation as soon as possible. She told the Dizi, wherever Shifu goes, I will go too. At the time, my Shimu had just undergone surgery, and her wound had not yet fully healed. Nevertheless, Prosecutor Hou Kuanren, who was in charge of the case, ignored her voluntary appearance and detained her under the pretext of potential flight risk or collection of testimony. During her detention, the prosecutor neither summoned her for cross-examination nor provided due process, instead continuously threatening my Shifu and Shimu with the extradition of their children studying abroad. During the 155 days of detention, my Shimu endured the prosecutor's sarcasm, intimidation, and harsh interrogation, as well as malice and provocation from others in detention centers. The poor damn condition worsened her surgical wound. Yet, when she was released on bail, she still wore a warm smile. Attorney Jiang Ruiqing, who voluntarily defended Taijimen's case, once shared, the judicial process took a long 10 years and 3 months due to the judge's lack of understanding about Qigong. The litigation did not go smoothly. However, no matter how challenging the circumstances, we never heard a word of complaint from our Shimu. Even when the Dizi were emotionally unstable or unprepared with the court materials, she never uttered a single reproach. Instead, she patiently encouraged us, gave us detailed reminders, and brought large bags of snacks to feed us. When my Shifu was not in Taiwan, Shimu often led the Dizi in organizing and participating in various large-scale events. As Vice President of the Federation of World Peace and Love and Chairperson of the Association of World Citizens, she dedicated herself to promoting global peace, a culture of love and conscience, human rights, environmental sustainability, and global citizenship awareness. These efforts are far removed from traditional stereotype of woman. Despite facing persecution, she maintained an optimistic and warm attitude, leading Dizi to do what was right. Her love accompanies us along this adroit yet meaningful path of self-cultivation. Regrettably, in 2020, the year when Taijimen's cultivation land was illegally auctioned off and confiscated by the National Taxation Bureau in collaboration with the Administrative Enforcement Agency, my Shimu passed away, leaving behind the unresolved grievance of the Taijimen case. In March 2024, the NGO Association of World Citizens at the United Nations presented the World Peace Contribution Award to my Shimu, recognizing her as a selfless role model dedicated to love and peace. Step by step, she advanced her from home to Taijimen and beyond, embracing the world. Modern women's rights are the result of countless efforts of a generation, yet there is still much work to be done. Today, November 25, is the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. Violence against women remains one of the most widespread human rights violations in the world. These violations occur not only in other developed or developing countries, but also in developed nations. Alarmingly, only 5% of governments priority support for women affected by violence, and less than 0.2% focus on preventing violence altogether. Although Taiwan prides itself on being a leader in women's rights in Asia, there are still areas for improvement and implementation across different sectors. I believe that with the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, and with the attention and advocacy of people like you and me, we can achieve more comprehensive and robust development of women's rights in this increasingly diverse and open area. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Dora, for elaborating on the topic of the International Day on the Elimination of Violence Against Women, and for stressing that Taiwan is ahead of women's rights in the world. But you also recalled that the traditional Chinese concept about gender was men working outside and women staying home. Taijimen's teachings were not on that page, but contributed to the general trend in Taiwan of the emancipation of women. The most visible impact and success of Dr. Hong's teachings is the massive number of female Dizi in Taijimen and the sharing of the leadership of Taijimen by Dr. Hong with his wife. And now I will give the floor to number 2 of the Dizi speakers, a male student this time. Eric Can, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Eric. I just graduated from university. Today marks the International Day for Elimination of Violence Against Women, a day that reminds us all to work toward eradication violence, inequality, and discrimination. Violence is not limited to physical harm. It also includes psychological violence, particularly a structural violence embedded in societal, cultural, and governmental systems. These forms of violence are often hidden in everyday life, infringing on people's freedom, safety, and dignity. Today, I want to address a critical issue: when violence comes from governmental institutions and public authorities. It not only violates individuals, but also challenges fundamental human rights. A striking example is the 919 Zhubei incident that occurs on September 19, 2020. During this incident, a volunteer mother, Ms. Huang, stood on the street holding a sign expressing her concern about tax reform. As a mother and a social volunteer, she was simply exercising her rights to free expression within legal bounds. However, she was subjected to unwarranted police interrogation, forcibly taken to the police station without being informed and any charge, and transferred to the prosecutor office late at night. This misuse of power caused her to develop acute stress disorder, severely impacting her mental health. This incident sparked widespread public concern, promoting us to reconsider the profound effects of unchecked power on innocent individuals. Ms. Huang's experience is deeply distressing and reveals the disregards for fundamental rights by governmental institutions in exercising public authority. In this case, despite committing no illegal acts, Ms. Huang was treated as a suspect caught in the act and subjected to improper treatment without any legal basis. Her suffering serves as a warning, reminding us that when vulnerable groups face abuse of power by government institutions, they often cannot receive the protection they deserve and are instead treated as criminals. Such situations are alarming because they threaten everyone's basic freedom and safety, especially when the victims belong to marginalized communities. Another example of such abuse in Taiwan is the Taijimen case, a prolonged dispute since 1996 involving judicial and tax authorities. It demonstrates how government agencies can misuse power to suppress religious freedom. Many Taijimen members have endured long-term unfair treatment, facing the deprivation of their faith and profound emotional harm. This cause illustrates the far-reaching effects of structural violence perpetrated by public institutions against innocent individuals. Both Taijimen case and the 919 Zhubei incident reveal how governmental institutions misuse public power to suppress individual freedom of belief and speech. When such action target marginalized groups or specific communities, they are even more likely to go unnoticed. Once facing structural violence, vulnerable groups often struggle hard to gain attention and support they need, leaving their voices unheard and their struggles overlooked. Today, as we remember women who have faced violence and injustice, we must also deeply reflect on whether we are equally addressing the violence and injustice stemming from public power. Violence takes many forms, and structural violence from governmental institutions inflicts profound harm, transcending gender and affecting everyone. As members of society, we must stand up for those who cannot speak for themselves. We must change power-based inequality to strive to create a fairer and freer society for all, especially women. Today, we gather not only to mourn or reflect on past harm, but also to fight for change in the future. Let us honor the women who have endured violence and join hands to build a world free from violence and discrimination and oppression. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric, for reminding us through the Hubei incident of the 19th of September that public authorities can be non-discriminatory in the repression of the use of freedom of expression, making no difference between men and women when resorting to violence. The public denial of rights was genderless in that case, but you rightly paid tribute to the physical courage of Mrs. Wang, who did not hide behind the protection of a man to combat injustice. She decided to stand on the street bravely, holding a sign denouncing a deliberate misuse of the law in the Taijimen fabricated case of tax evasion. But you also stress that violence is not limited to physical harm. It also encompasses psychological abuse, particularly structural violence rooted in social, cultural, and even governmental systems. Now, our third dizzy is again a girl and again a student, a college student, Andrew Wang. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello everyone. My name is Indra. I'm a college student. Today is an International Day of the Elimination of Violence Against Women. When it comes to the forms of violence against women, there are actually many forms, such as gender discrimination, domestic violence, sexual violence, etc. However, the imperfection of legal norms is undoubtedly a violence. Due to inadequate legal protection, can easily put women and other vulnerable groups into more disadvantaged situations and can be harmed. I'm currently studying law and I'm also a Taijimen Dizi. So today I would like to take the occurrence of the Taijimen case as an example to put forward my thoughts and suggestions on the legal loopholes. In Taijimen, we have a Shifu and Shimu who deeply love their Dizi. From the interaction between my Shifu and Shimu, I deeply understand the infinite love and respect the Shifu has for Shimu. Among my brothers and sisters in Taijimen, many husbands and wives had also learned a lot from Shifu example and teaches. They cherish each other more in life, gradually improve their relationship between husband and wives, and make their family more harmoniously and peaceful. The conscious culture taught by Taijimen to its Dizi is a concept of love and peace for all things in the world. Of course, it is more protective and respectful for vulnerable women. However, such a group and excellent culture full of love and respect have been persecuted due to the Taijimen case. In December 1996, prosecutor Hou Kuanren abused his power to prosecute without investigation or evidence. He also used the media to incite public opinions and mislead the public into doubling the innocence and integrity of Taijimen. Women are already at a disadvantage in society, and many female Taijimen Dizi have suffered double discrimination and persecution from the judiciary and society because of such unwarranted cases. The Taijimen case reveals significant shortcomings in Taiwan's legal system. Prosecutors are obligated to fill charges based on solid unreliable evidence, as outlined in Taiwan's Code of Criminal Procedures. However, Prosecutor Hou breached his principle, resulting in considerable harm to Taijimen's reputation and the lives of its Dizi. Alarmingly, he has not been held accountable for his action. On the contrary, he was promoted afterward. Some media reported untrue content without verification, which caused the Taijimen Shifu and Dizi at the time to suffer from pressures from the public opinions, misunderstanding, and discrimination. Hou Kuanren even violated Article 245 Element 1 of the Code of Criminal Procedures. Its principles of investigation is not disclosed. He published false information and illegally used the power of the media to deepen the public misunderstanding of Taijimen. Although the Control Yuan found 8 major violations in Prosecutor Hou Kuanren handling of the Taijimen case, the Ministry of Justice High Prosecutor's Office decided that Hou was not responsible because more than 10 years has passed. This kind of mutual protection among officials shows abuse of power and cover-ups. Even our beloved Shimu, who was not a suspect, was unjustly detained and mistreated. This mistreatment, particularly after her recent surgery, further compromised her health. On this important day, we can deeply reflect on the prosecutor abuse of power and false media reporting issues caused by Taiwan's legal loopholes in Taijimen case, and then on social violence among women and vulnerable groups. The case highlights an urgent need for legal reform in Taiwan, specifically concerning the oversight of prosecutorial power. According to statistics, after prosecution in Taiwan, the prosecutor appeal rate is as high as 81.60%. However, after the cases that were adequate in the first instance enter to the second instance, 80.43% were invalid appeals. That is, the second instance result still maintained acquittal. So, prosecutors should be held accountable for filing wrongful charges, and Taiwan should implement preventive measures. For example, France has a pretrial judge system, where the United States uses grand jury to review indictments. This practice can help prevent abuse and restore public trust in the judicial system. In addition, Taiwanese regulation should also strengthen the self-regulatory mechanism for the media, requiring the media to follow the principles of fact verification and conduct strict review of sources when reporting any cases. Since it's generally difficult for the media in Taiwan to survive, most of the operations are profit-oriented. As a result, many media reports are the first to report without verification. Therefore, we should strengthen legal preservation of media reporting and formulate corresponding legal responsibilities for irresponsible reporting behavior to maintain an environment of balanced media reporting and fair competition. In addition, Taiwan's current ratio for reporter reporting news is extremely low. As long as a newspaper agrees to hire them, they can obtain a press card. However, there are no regulations to restrict reporters who report false news, allowing unscrupulous reporters to continue to practice unscrupulously. Under vicious competitions, it is difficult for the media industry to prevent good qualities, especially in the face of important society events. It is against discovered that the Taiwanese media not only does not respect the rights and interests of the parties involved, but even maliciously exaggerates them. If there is no improvement, the media will not only be unable to protect the innocent and become an effective force of democracy, but will also easily become the culprits of corrupting social atmosphere. I believe that if prosecutors can prosecute based on evidence and implement non-public investigations, they can not only reduce the occurrence of unjust cases, but also achieve the most basic protection of human rights. At the same time, I think that excellent cultural education like Taijimen will be more widely promoted in society, thereby promoting the general implementation of a peaceful culture of love and conscience in society. Not only will everyone know how to respect each other, but they will also know how to protect women. We hope that we can work together so that women and other disadvantaged groups in society can be better respected and protected in legal and practical situations. Thank you all.
And thank you, Andra, for reminding us the sad 28-year-long saga of the Taijimen case. You also stress that the imperfection of legal norms can undoubtedly be a source of violence, institutional violence, which equally hits women and men. I'm also happy that you focus as well on the damage that can be caused by the media outlets, by journalists, the way they cover incidents, the shameful way they cover some incidents that damages and sometimes destroys the life of people, their professional life, their family life. And this is something that should not be forgotten. And we have repeatedly fought against the media which do not respect the ethical norms that are worldwide, I would say, or at least in democracies, be accepted. And you also focused on the living example of the mutual love between Shifu and Shimu as a model of relations for any couple, and I'm sure that their example is being followed by a lot of Dizzy in their family, in their married life, and that they will transmit the same message to their children. And now I will give the floor to our fourth speaker, not a student this time, but an elementary school teacher. Sophia Chen, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Sophia. It's my pleasure to participate as a speaker here with you. I'm a social studies teacher at an elementary school. In the we learn about an extraordinary girl named Malala. She risked her life to fight for the right to education for girls in Pakistan. Malala's hometown was under the control of the Taliban, a group that used force to prohibit girls from receiving education. For children in Taiwan who enjoy a relatively free environment, such circumstances are almost unimaginable and inconceivable. During my teaching, I guide my students to reflect on the following questions. If I were Malala, what would I do? And if fighting for the right to education for the public endangered the lives of myself and my loved ones, would I have the courage to stand by my principles? At the age of 11, Malala began writing a diary for the BBC in the UK, documenting her life filled with fear and violence, exposing the atrocities of the Taliban to the world. Despite facing threats to her life, she received support from earned her the Nobel Peace Prize in 2014 when she was just 17 years old. This story deeply moved me, and I felt compelled to pass on this inspiration to my students. By planting the seeds of kindness in their hearts, I believe that these children will one day influence their families, friends, and even society and the nation, creating a positive cycle. This will help eradicate violence and foster a stable environment for societal and national development. In Taiwan, many organizations are dedicated to eliminating violence against women by providing practical and effective resources and support. One such organization is the Garden of Hope Foundation. Over the years, the foundation has offered assistance to women. Statistics in 2023, 17,300 women were able to reduce their risk of violence or escape violent environments thanks to social support. The Garden of Hope provides professional social work services to support survivors of domestic violence and children who have witnessed family violence as they heal from trauma. They assist them in seeking legal rights, achieving housing and financial stability, and repairing family and interpersonal relationships. Step by step, they help these individuals reintegrate into their communities and regain independence. In addition to domestic violence, state violence also calls for our attention and support. Take the case of Miss Wu Peichun as an example. She was originally the dean of a crime years ago. Her employer decided to shut down the crime school after
non ho la connection.
Pardon? Should I continue? Okay. Okay. Let's see where I should continue. Okay. Okay. Miss Wu Peichun was originally the dean of a crime school. Years ago, her employer decided to shut down the crime school after collecting tuition fees from students. Out of compassion for the students preparing for their exams in July, Mrs. Wu attempted to take over the crime school. However, the deal fell through, and the ownership was never transferred to her. The crime school was officially deregistered that July. Despite this, the tax authorities issued her an unwarranted tax bill. This unexpected and massive tax debt left her with no avenues for relief, causing severe emotional distress, physical illness, and financial ruin. When I first deeply saddened. Ms. Wu's original intention was to help students by trying to keep the crime school running. However, the National Taxation Bureau, disregarding both law and reason, targeted her as a scapegoat when they couldn't recover the unpaid taxes from the crime school. They attribute the NTD 1.6 million in back taxes owned by the crime school entirely to her and relentlessly pursue her, forcing her to pay. The misuse of state power is such an unlawful and coercive manner. Twisting her benevolent intentions is truly bewildering and heartbreaking. Taijimen is also a victim of unjust and unlawful tax bills. The monetary gifts given by Taijimen members are voluntary gifts. However, in 1997, the National Taxation Bureau, without evidence or proper investigation, relied solely on the unlawful indictment by then prosecutor Hou Kuan-ren. They mischaracterized these monetary gifts as tuition fees for a crime school and issued a tax bill based on this misrepresentation. Even though Taijimen pursued every possible legal remedy within and outside the system, the unjust tax bill persisted. In 2020, Administrative Enforcement Agency illegally auctioned off Taijimen's designated spiritual cultivation site and forcibly confiscated it as state property. This case, rooted in a campaign against religious groups and politically motivated persecution, has led to severe human rights violations, with around 10,000 disciples and their families affected, coupled with the absurd misconduct or corrupt officials. It has become a landmark case. Scholars have aptly referred to it as the Tax and Legal February 28 incident. Although I'm just an elementary school teacher, I'm also a Taijimen Deed and a volunteer for the Act 1290 were isolated incidents. However, the more I got involved, the more I realized the astonishing number of victims affected by unjust tax bills issued due to the misuse of power. No one is an outsider. The National Taxation Bureau's misuse of power has directly or indirectly impacted every aspect of our lives. Why is Taiwan struggling to retain talent? Why are businesses reluctant to establish roots here? Taiwan ranks at the bottom in Asia for foreign investment. What is the hidden force dragging down Taiwan's economy? It is the actions of a few corrupt officials who fail to follow the law, disregard human rights, and undermine the rule of law. This is not just speculation. It is happening now. The principle should be clear. And not a penny less for legitimate taxes. That is what it means to abide by law. For the sake of everyone on this land, we cannot allow such abuses to persist. We must speak out for justice, ensuring that light dispels the darkness of corruption and restores faith in our system. Finally, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Malala, who risked her life fighting for women's right to education, and to the Garden of Hope Foundation, which provides vital support to women affected by violence, and also to the Act 1219, which stands firm against unjust tax bills. Your dedication and courageous voices raise awareness about human rights issues and let victims know they are not alone. Thank you for your attention.
Lily, you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I was muted. Yeah. So, I say, well, thank you, Sophia, for reminding us of the courage of the young Pakistani girl named Malala Yousafzai and her fight at the risk of her life for the right to education for girls in Pakistan. She was born in that valley of Pakistan where the Islamic Taliban movement had taken control of all the institutions now, well, a long time ago in 2008. And at that time, girls' schools were burned down because it was an order of the Taliban. And as we know, they are absolutely against the rights of women and girls and their access to education. And Malala, at the age of 11, already kept a diary of the events that she was witnessing. And it was published in 2009 by the BBC Urdu program. And in the diary, she spoke out against the Taliban's terrorist regime. And 6 years later, imagine, she got the Peace Nobel Prize for her fight for the right to education for girls in her country. An exceptional destiny, absolutely, that you, Sophia, shared with your students, which is very important, and asked them the challenging question if they would have the courage to stand by their principles, if the lives of their loved ones and their own lives were in danger. And of course, we don't need to be all heroes at the level of Malala, but let's be practitioners of truth and justice modestly in our ordinary daily life, and it will be okay for all of us. And now the last speaker is not a student, is not a teacher, but she's a woman with a lot of experience that she will share with us. It's Karen Wang, an international sales representative. The floor is yours, Karen.
Thank you, Wally. Hi, I'm Karen. I'm very glad to participate in this forum. And I'm the last one Taijuman did. According to United Nations report, approximately 1 in 3 women globally experience physically or sexually violence in their lifetime. The number is very shocking and shows the prevalence and seriousness of the problem of violence against women. Violence takes many forms, including domestic violence, sexual harassment, sexual assault, and so on. This behavior not only have a serious impact on humans physically and mental health, but also pose a threat to the stability and development of the entire society. I was an international sales representative for an electronic company. A young and outstanding woman joined our company this year. Her working performance was very excellent, and she was often praised by her supervisor in public. However, she discovered that her boss became increasingly inappropriate and even sexually harassed her in the workplace, making her feel helpless and scared because she was worried that if she came forward, she would lose her job and even affect her career. However, she ultimately didn't choose to remain silent, but began to seek support and report the situation to college and HR support. She successfully reported the incident to the senior management and prompted the company to formulate a strict anti-sexual harassment policy. This female employee's behavior not only changed her own destiny, but also created a positive impact on other women. This story tells us that standing up bravely and speak out is an important step in eliminating violence, whether in the workplace or in life. Women should have the right and ability to defend their dignity and safety. More importantly, the fundamental approach is to implement gender equality and respect for the human rights through education. On April 22, 2021, an African drum teacher, Jan, took a train from Taichung to Zhongli Station and was about to go to the rehearsal room for class. However, she was stopped by a police officer, Mr. Ye, and asked her to show her ID with no reason. She believed that the police request was unreasonable and refused, and then was restrained by the police. He robbed her of her mobile file and refused to allow her to search for evidence, causing teacher Jan to angrily yell, "You're really stupid!" And the police then pushed her down on the road and choked her with the handcuffs, causing multiple bruises on her leg and elbows. After the incident, it attracted public attention and many people came forward to support teacher Zhang, especially since Taiwan has been a democratic country that has lived martial law for many years. The police should not abuse their power. Later, teacher Zhang filed a lawsuit to fight for her own rights. And then the police officer, Mr. Ye, was sentenced to 4 and 6 months in prison for 2 crimes respectively. However, Ms. Zhang believed that the personality should not be borne by the police officer personally. So she, accompanied by a lawyer last year, went to the Zhongli branch to submit a claim for $2 million in state compensation, hoping to promote police discipline reform. Heaven helps those who help themselves. Recently, the court ruled to the Zhongli branch should pay Ms. Zhang $780. It made me realize that the human rights should be respected, but if they are voided, don't be afraid of power. Stand up and speak up bravely, and the power of justice will eventually be revealed. This is what my Sifu and Simu teach us in Taijimen. We should move forward courageously when facing the right thing. We must bravely reject things that are incorrect and wrong. Taijimen is a empire of ancient Qigong martial arts and a non-profit organization. Under the leadership of Sifu, these voluntarily cultivate their body and mind and share the great thing they have learned in Taijimen with the people around them, so that more people can find ways to be happy, both physically and mentally. Over the years, teachers have followed Sifu to visit more than 100 countries around the world, using love and conscience to promote peace culture. However, such an excellent group was persecuted by government power in 1996, when Taiwan has first directly elected president. Due to political and social factors, many religious and spiritual practice groups were vigorously suppressed. Taijimen also suffered a disaster. At that time, the prosecutor didn't investigate and immediately led a large number of prosecutors, police investigation, and the media to eagerly search 12 Taijimen academies and 19 residents of the Dizi and took my Sifu away. At the same time, Simu was not accused at all. In order to clarify the case, she actively cooperated with the prosecutor's investigation. She took the investigation to go to the Taipei City Investigation Office to explain. Simu said that she had a surgery and the wound had not yet healed. The whole coroner immediately detained her on the grounds, as she was in danger of failing or colluding with witness. She was subjected to various threats and persecutions in the detention center and was restricted for leaving the country for 782 years. Simu was completely unavailable to meet the children overseas, which seriously violated her rights to family reunification. On the same day, Hokran still freezing all the property of my Sifu and Simu, regardless of whether they were related to the case or not. All of them were frozen without leaving a penny. There's a line in the movie of the famous director Zhang Yimou. We're not dealing with cases, but other people's life. Judiciary is the last line of defense to protect human rights and uphold justice. However, behind the image of the Taiwanese government as a beacon of democracies in Asia, it continues to use legal and taste means to persuade people's freedom of belief and human rights. Looking back on those days, Sifu and Simu suffered unjust imprisonment, but they still lead to love the country and the world, and promote love and peace through cultural exchange and ring the world love and peace bell. Now, Simu has passed away. It was too late to see the vindication of the Taijimen fake case, but as Sifu continued to lead these to stick to the right path. In recent years, more and more people in society have begun to pay attention to this issue of law. The international Me Too movement driven by social media in recent years have allowed many parties and witnesses of sexual harassment to break their silence and bravely tell their own Me Too stories. It's like from a single voice to a chorus. Former President Tsai Ing-wen was once the first female in Chinese world. This represents the Taiwanese people awakened to women's rights and their high expectation of women's rights. We call President Lai and his cabinet to uphold their own conscience, visit the Taijuman faith case, and return the holy place for spiritual practice to us. Therefore, women and other disadvantaged groups in society can obtain physically, mental, and spiritual protection and respect, both in law and in life. Thank you.
And thank you, Karen, for sharing with us stories of very brave women fighting for respect and dignity by men in power. A female employee fighting successfully against sexual harassment, first against herself, but afterwards for a strict sexual harassment policy in her company. The story of an African drum teacher abusively controlled by the police on a train, successfully prosecuting the police officer who was sentenced to a prison term and successfully claiming financial compensation from the Zhongli branch. In conclusion, you said that this is what your Shifu and Shimu teach the dizzy in Taijimen, to move forward courageously when facing such injustice in daily life. And let's hope that your call to President Lai and his cabinet to uphold their own conscience, vindicate the Taijimen fake case, and return the holy place for spiritual practice will be listened to and really heard. And this is the end of the second session, where I was very happy to accompany all the dizzies who had a really very interesting experience and thoughts to share with us, and will make us richer than we were before the beginning, mentally and psychologically, spiritually richer than before the beginning of this webinar. Now the floor will be handed back to Marco. I think that he's now online again, and he will introduce the last speaker for the conclusions.
Thank you, Willie. Yes, I'm back again. I had a few technical problems,
Yes.
but I managed to solve it. So thank you, everyone. The first session was very enlightening with scholars, and the second session, I want to join Willie in thanking the rich experience that Vizi shared with all of us. And without further ado, I'm introducing Dr. Massimo Introvigne, who is the founder of the Center for Studies on New Religions, which is the second organization who sponsors and manages these series of webinars, and the editor-in-chief of Bitter Winter as well, which where I serve as director in charge. He will draw some conclusion by way of video message, because he was not able to be without in person. He is traveling for defending religious liberty. So, I mean, liberty of religion and belief. So it's a very important task. So I give the virtual microphone to Dr. Introvigne. Thank you so much.
In the day encouraging us to fight against violence targeting women, one is reminded of many women who were persecuted because of their spirituality. Societies were never really ready to accept women as spiritual leaders. One emblematic story is that of Beatrice Kimpavita, the founder of the African religious movement known as Antonianism. Born in 1684 in present-day Angola and baptized as a Roman Catholic, she was also initiated into secret societies promoting different forms of African indigenous spirituality. At her time, Angola was part of the Kingdom of Congo, an important state weakened by civil war and Portuguese colonialism. Kimpa venerated King Anthony I of Congo, who died some 20 years before she was born, as the Messiah, and claimed to be possessed by his spirit. Reportedly, she heard voices from God telling her she should fight to reunify the divided kingdom and expel the Portuguese. The success of her movement raised the concern of King Pedro IV, who had her arrested, tried as a heretic and a sorceress, and burned at stake in 1706, together with her partner João Barro, who was the father of her son. Although the army of 20,000 she had raised was defeated after her death, ultimately her action did result in the unification of Congo. There are obvious similarities between Kimpavita and Joan of Arc. Joan also claimed she had received divine voices commanding her to raise an army, reunify the Kingdom of France, and expel the British. She was also captured, tried as heretic and sorceress, and burned at stake in 1431. As in the case of Kimpavita, her plan to reunify her country succeeded after her death. Unlike Kimpa, however, she was eventually not only rehabilitated but canonized as a saint by the Catholic Church. While many know Joan of Arc, named not after a French city, as many believe, but after the name of her father, lesser known today is Joan of Arcadia. Her name comes from Arcadia, California, and she is a fictional character in a TV series that aired in the United States between 2003 and 2005. Critical acclaim was higher than commercial success, and the series was cancelled after 2 seasons, ignoring the protest of committed fans. Like Joan of Arc, Italian-American teenager John Girardi also hears from God, much to her surprise. God doesn't convey to her sensational revelations, but gives her clues to help her father, who happens to be Arcadia's police chief, to solve local crimes. God also lectures her on peace, love, and common sense. Because of her attempts to spread these ideas, she encounters also opposition, perhaps coming from the devil himself, as implied in the last episode of the series, whose question should have been answered in the cancelled 3rd season. Miracles are downplayed. In one of the first episodes, Joan asks God to perform a miracle to make her believe. God simply shows her a tree. When she says this is not a miracle, God answers, try to create one yourself. There was a profound moral in the story of Joan of Arcadia, one that endeared the show to fans and is also relevant for a day where we honor the women of Taiji-men. Yes, both Kimpavita and Joan of Arc show that women fighting for justice and spirituality may risk their lives and become victims of extreme violence. However, most women with a strong spiritual commitment are more like Joan of Arcadia. They are not burned at stake, but they may encounter serious and painful opposition. This is what happened and continues to happen to the women of Taijimen. They deserve a special day to honor them for their resilience and their key role, in keeping Taijimen healthy, growing, and expanding during years of persecution and harassment. Some were and are heroic characters, none more than the late Madame Yu Meiyong, Taijimen Shimu, and the wife of Shifu Grandmaster, Dr. Ong Daotse. When Shifu was arrested, and you see my cat who wants also to participate, when Shifu was arrested in 1996, Shimu was also taken to the detention center. She shared both his suffering and the victory when the Supreme Court in 2007 concluded that they were not guilty of any crime. She continued to be a key reference for all Taijimen Ditsi until her death. A paradigmatic case is also that of Mrs. Wang, a woman peacefully protesting the injustice of the Taijimen case, who was detained and mistreated on September 19, 2020. There are other similar cases too. We, the international scholars who have taken an interest in the Taijimen case, have continuously met great women dizzy, fighting relentlessly for justice and spreading the message of peace, love, and conscience throughout the world. You are our sisters, and this day is for you.
Thank you, Dr. Massimo Improvigne, for his poignant final remarks, very apt to, and Cat too, as we saw, wanted to participate. Very nice. So this is our conclusion for today, and I want to thank you, every one of you, and salute all of you. And I leave you with our last bite of justice and truth for Taijimen in this special Women Day. And it's a video, our third and final video for today, and whose title is Falling Off Conscience. Thank you so much.
Mm.